This is F.D. Recovery, where we interview addicts and alcoholics.
Our aim is that through this podcast, we might help you on your journey of recovery.
Thank you for listening. Hello, this is Frank with F.D. Recovery. All right, let's get into it. This is the weekly intention. Every Monday, we get down with a spiritual principle or topic, and we go over it and just see how it worked in our recovery and, give our thoughts on it, basically. Hold on, let me turn this up so I can hear myself a little bit better. There we go. All right, so this week's been kind of a crazy week. It kind of knocked me out of alignment because I had to do a little bit of traveling on Friday. I had to take it off to deal with some family stuff, funeral, and be there for my oldest. And her grandpa passed away, and so yeah. But the way integrity worked in my week this last week is just trying to be authentic, right? This whole integrity piece is it gets a little easier, right? Because you when you start living this life of spiritual principles and recovery, right, you do your best to try not to fuck anybody over and try to live right, which is kind of the polar opposite of when we're out there using and drugging, right? And so it's pretty crazy to kind of to shift the gears on it. And for most of us, we kind of need that drama in our life to kind of feel something, right? Because most of my maladaptive techniques is to kind of shut the world out and turn myself off. And no matter what's going on, I just kind of numb out, and I don't kind of need a substance to do that. I was kind of doing that already with at least my feelings and stuff. And for me, the way it worked, yeah, don't get me wrong, there was an element of numbing it out, but I also knew how to block things out with distraction and anger and resentments, blame, envy, jealousy, all these things to kind of distract myself from working on myself. And it works for a time, right? But the cost is pretty severe, at least now. Spiritually, most of my costs were usually they weren't very spiritual in the past. It was either I got locked up, or it was monetary or fines, something like that. But it was mostly being locked up or losing everything, right? And that's the key piece to this is like worrying about what happens spiritually, right? Because that was never a thing. It was always about how can I serve my selfish needs, and how can I get what I'm gonna get, and that was it, right? At the cost of your sanity, my sanity, and everything that was good in my world at the time. And it takes a lot of getting back from, because when you get into like the brain aspect of it, especially like neuroplasticity and things like that, right, where you're firing off pathways in the brain and you're learning habits, it's really hard to just kind of shut these pathways off, right? You've been traveling down that way so long with some of these techniques you've learned in this life. And something good was said in the week, right? I was really focusing on integrity, but somebody in a meeting said, I couldn't quite put the words to it, right, in my brain. And then they said it plain as day. They said, I was used to getting into situations and manipulating my way there, and then I couldn't keep it because I didn't grow to that point. right? I manipulated myself to that point and I didn't grow to it. And there's a huge difference, right? And it really hit me because I was like, wow, that I said a version of that, but I was like, it hit it home a little bit more for me. And I was like, oh yeah, that clicks a little bit better. Growing to that point instead of manipulating yourself and fast talking, right? And I was just so involved with the self concept and never really worried about how I can be a benefit to others, right? And not saying that everything is about every other person and all I do is serve, but today there's a big part of that reigns true, right? You can't really get where you need to go, at least as far as some of this recovery stuff, because what happens is if you get too focused on all the wrong things, right, you fall back into that pattern, and for me that means picking up again. And when O'Doul's sounds like a good idea, or smoking a little bit of weed sounds like a good idea, it those small permissions, we call it. And um, I've always been a big person on trying to find things to simplify it, right? Because my big smart brain thinks I'm so intelligent that I got to think of one-liners to kind of calm myself down, right? And that's right there, is getting to that point of growing to it instead of manipulating it your way to it. And that really hit, because that hits home for integrity for me, because most of the way I got something was a lie, or misled you to think that I could either handle this job or handle these opportunities, to just get my foot in the door. And once I was there, I never acquired any of the skills to kind of keep the position, or at least standpoint in life, where I would get overwhelmed, get high, and relapse, and there it went all over again, right? And I never took the time to do the small details that really mattered, and that's what integrity is all about: is working on those little things that you think aren't a big deal when they really are, right? Sticking to your word when you know you need to, not just, and that's a hard one, right? Because most people, not to be negative, will just say whatever fits the situation at the time to kind of get what they want done, or at least maybe just to avoid conflict, right? And that's not the life that I'm trying to build today, right? Someone told me, like, some of this stuff will, put in a wrong or right context, and I said, I don't deal with what's right or wrong, right? It's what's working and what's not, right? Because um, to put it in that moral light, yeah, don't get me wrong, you have to live with the moral compass and beliefs, but what's wrong to somebody else doesn't mean it's wrong to another person, right? So it's all a means of perception, right? And so obviously the basics: don't kill, murder, rape, all these things are pretty not no don't steal, they're pretty no brainer type shit, right? But with some of these little deeper aspects of spirituality, right, there's a whole spectrum that you kind of need to step back and look at, right? Because what worked for my recovery in the beginning necessarily what doesn't work now. So it's like, okay, instead of just moralizing it to death and making somebody the bad guy, I like to, okay, maybe I just need to let go of this because it's no longer serving me, right? It's no longer good for me right now. And if I break it down in that context, it makes it a little bit less blamey, if that's a good word, or even if it's a word, blamey, than it would be if I was just to be like, okay, because when I start looking at things bad, good, indifferent, all that stuff, I start walking into a world of judgment, right? And yes, you have to be discerning, and that's the goal here, right? But there doesn't need to be a victim, or a perpetrator, any of that, man. Don't get me wrong. You have to hold people accountable in your life and also yourself. But to fall into the narrative is another thing, right? So kind of taking a step back and going, all right, I give life to this story that's within my mind and within this painted canvas that I'm doing for myself and my perception, right? And today I'm going to choose to not walk down the road of victimhood, walk down the road of perpetrator, all these head trips that can come along with the ego, right? And learn to hold myself accountable and only myself, right? Also, if the times arise, hold somebody else accountable, right? Don't hold their head to the flame, because that's not what we're here for, right? When we do inventory, it's about us. We're not trying to do somebody else's inventory, because it's just not the name of the game. At least in recovery and spirituality, right? Those are the things I've learned, right? And some of this integrity piece, you have to accept some of this stuff within yourself, right? And, we spoke about integrity being the intention for last week, and things we kind of brought up was the contrast was hypocrisy. Well, if somebody out there thinks they're not a hypocrite, they're full of shit, right? I'm a hypocrite all the time. It's about progress rather than perfection, and these are those things we're kind of striving to kind of complete in this life, right? The thing that I'm trying to do is just be a little bit better today, right? Be a little bit more transparent with the people you need to be, right? You don't need to be just willy-nilly with any geek off the street. That's not the concept here. It's rising to the level you can, and where you're at, because sometimes if I've learned with myself, when things happened a little bit too soon, it put me in a worse off way, right? When I was confronted in certain situations where it was just like I could have handled that differently, and I wouldn't have put so much pain in the arena for myself, and just learn how to kind of take it slow, and take those step by steps, because I'm just so used to being like so brash with myself and other people that I really got to take a step, take a breath, and try to speak honestly and truthful about where I'm at and how I see things, because you can put out a line of shit and you could have a motive behind it the whole time, but to just kind of express what you're going through, and kind of how it's manifesting in you at the moment, instead of just trying to share something to tweak somebody's vision around you, and get them along, get them to fall suit, right? And that's the kind of goal that I set for myself with integrity is, if I'm sitting here trying to change the mind of everybody else around me, what are you really doing? You're just back into that manipulation mode, right? And you're not growing. And that's kind of the key for me this week is just following some of those guidelines, and just trying to connect back to my soul and spirit, because when you're on this walk with God and spirit, and however it resonates with you, you're doing these things on a coherent level, and you're really trying to push forward some of these manifestations, right? And today I want to manifest more love in my life. I want to manifest more patience. I want to manifest full on integrity, and I know I'm going to fall short in all those categories. And just being able to have that patience and forgiveness for myself is super important, right? Because you can sit here and bullshit yourself all day, and go down the road of punishment and cruelty, but in the end, it's just kind of doing an honest inventory with yourself, and just knowing that, hey, man, we're human. It's gonna get messy. Nobody came to some of these situations like a 12-step meeting on a kick-ass winning streak. It's just not something that really happened, right? And it's kind of cliche, but once you get there and you're kind of out of the fog, some of these things kind of click for you, right? Some of the things you used to roll your eyes at is kind of the stuff that starts clicking, and it's just kind of known knowledge now. Um, oh, and I didn't even mention what this week's uh, intention is. It's going to be grief. Um, I know it's more of a topic than a spiritual principle, right? But I'm going to get off integrity. Well, I'm going to stay on integrity in my life, but we're moving from integrity now to grief. The reason I chose grief is my oldest daughter, she just lost her grandfather, and that's heavy stuff, man. Watching, being there at the funeral, and getting asked to be there by your daughter just to kind of be support. And you know she only has she lost her grandparent on her mother's side. That was the her grandmother died a little bit over a year ago, and then now her other grandpa left. And it's two back to back. And that's why I chose grief, because dealing with some of these stages that we go through, especially with loss, and some of those things that we wish we could have done or wish we could have said, right? Because we get so lost in our ego, it blocks us in the reality that this life is very finite, and we're gonna leave here one day, right? And just to kind of see the impact one person's soul had on the world and environment around them, it's inspiring to just want to step. Sorry, guys, that's the garbage truck in the background. So sorry if it's any noise. I will not edit this out because it's just what it is, right? So, the seeing the impact that somebody had on all these lives, and the emotion and the human experience of loss, really called to me to just do this podcast on grief, because there's let's do a little let's see what almighty Google has to say, right? Grief, deep sorrow, especially that caused by someone's death, right? And right off the bat, it talks about death, right? And um, informal version of it is trouble or annoyance, right? I mean, that's definitely the best definition of grief. Let's see. The most widely accepted definition of grief is a natural and normal emotional response to loss or change. It encompasses a range of feelings, including sadness, anger, guilt, and despair, and can also include physical symptoms like difficulty sleeping and changes in appetite. Grief is often associated with death of a loved one, but it can also result from other significant losses or changes in life. Um, the grief recovery method defines grief as the normal reaction to loss or change, using the phrase the feeling of reaching out for someone who's also been there, only to discover when I need her or him one more time, she's no longer there. Oh, that's kind of all right. All right, let's see. So they said there's 5 stages of grief, right? And you can't really talk about grief except if you don't bring up the 5 stages, right? Wow, they said there's another place that says there's 7. We'll go over the 5 first. We don't want to inundate you with stages, right? So the first stage is denial. Second one looks like anger, bargaining. Fourth one is depression, and also acceptance, right? The 5 stages of grief. Okay, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. A little story I want to share, right? When I was, shoot, man, my daughter was born in 2013, and one of my best friends took his life in 2012. And I mean, this guy, he brought me into his family, and I come from a real abusive family, and no one really talks to each other. All I know is my brothers and sisters, who never expanded to our cousins. We know some of them, but I know mostly my stepmother's cousins, not my actual blood. I met a couple here and there, but they're all kind of to be honest, is they're all kind of drug addicts like me, and well, quite frankly, all pieces of shit, just like I was. No judgment, but whatever. I'm just judging. I'm not saying. So the whole aspect of this whole thing of losing somebody, right? And that was a hard thing for me, right? Because I remember getting the phone call, and the night before, I watched the ambulance fly by me, and I was in South Lake at the time, and I said this stupid joke. I was like, "Well, someone's life just changed," and I was laughing it off, and I was drinking, getting drunk at the bar, and lo and behold, that ambulance was the one that was picking up my best friend that hung himself, and that really set a trajectory in my life that because I'm also looking for any kind of reason to get high and drunk and poor me shit back then, right? And but to bring a little bit of weight to the situation, I get a call the next day, and you know the I get told over the phone that hey man, Kyler Kyler's no longer with us. And I say, wow, what? And it just kind of like, it was surreal. I didn't even react or anything like that. I'm like, what the? And where I was located, I was only a couple blocks away, so I kind of ran down there, and as soon as I seen them, I just broke down in tears, right, and was hugging them, and then I found out a little bit more, and and I found out how he did it and the moments leading up to it, and how heavy that was. And I just remember seeing the mother, like, which I was really close to it, and just in tears. And there's no amount of words that you can kind of muster to explain the pain of a mother kind of losing a son or a child, right? And sorry guys, it kind of it hits, because that was a heavy part of my life, right? And when we're talking about things like grief, I went through that whole denial, man. That anger, pissed off. Why did you do that, right? Because I come from having really nobody, right? At least that's where my brain was back then. And anybody that tried to get close to me, I pushed them away. And this was a person that kind of broke through the wall, and we were kind of there for each other, and I lived with for a time right there, and he was walking me through some of life's stuff, and vice versa. And we were two drug addicts, but it didn't make the connection any less. And looking back on it and watching that family grieve, and going up there and talking at the funeral, and being able to read a poem and just say what was on my heart and on my mind, going through these life changes, right? And going through these cycles, right? Understanding that, you know, we're going to have to take that journey one day, right? And, fast forwarding to now, right? Dealing and watching some of, especially my, because that was my ex-wife's father, and they had a rocky relationship, but they, you know, she got, without saying people's business, she got sober and things got better, right? It's kind of the classic for all of us, right? We get sober and we get in recovery, and all of a sudden things kind of almost magically get better. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's work involved, right? It just doesn't come through osmosis. You're just not going to get sober and think that that's going to be the ticket, right? But she's been, my ex-wife was putting in the work on her end, and she's got a gang of time now, and I think we got pretty close to the same amount of clean time. And just seeing the family go through that, and but also seeing how strong they are, right? And they all had beautiful stories, and funny, and because he was just like us, in my eyes. He was, he struggled with alcoholism too. I don't know about towards the end, but I know way back when, right? And just hearing the awesome stories from people that went up there, and how big his heart was, and um, it really got me thinking about this whole grief thing, right? And going, man, there's so many things that went unprocessed, right? And I'm like, you know what? I need to do one on grief because it's sometimes you just have to connect to your higher power and see what's driving you and see where he leads you. And grief, I was like, there's things that I'm still currently grieving that I haven't fully processed. And, things take time and it's definitely a process. But this week's intention, I wanted to focus on grief because there's so many things you know, that I've gone through that I've left kind of just on the back burner, right? And also being able to walk through grief with people, um, like a good brother of mine in recovery that we went through rehab together, and we were in tea house and we've stayed strong friends since. He had to bury his son at just like 20 years old, and that happened a couple years ago. And going to that funeral and standing next to him and hugging him in front of the coffin in front of his child, right? It makes me emotional just thinking about it now because these this is the real life, right? You know, being able to be there present for the people that you love in recovery, right? Without recovery, I would have never been able to be there in Reno, be there with my brother, and kind of walk through these different pathways, right? And just understanding that life is going to have its ebbs and flows because um, but as long as you can kind of connect to a higher power and give it to God, then you can kind of walk through this journey of life a little bit stronger in the end. Because cutting back to the whole being there for the people that you love, I couldn't never do that when I was high and getting drunk. There was many years where I was disconnected from my family, from my daughter, and that's what I'm striving for to do this time around, especially with my youngest, is not put myself in a position to ever do that um to another person ever again, because I know what it was like as a young kid to be abandoned. And I repeated that cycle in a lot of ways. And I mean, it was better that I did stay away in certain situations, whether it be with family and friends, because the condition I was in would only cause more strife to the development of other people, right? And so getting back to the topic of grief is learning how to kind of give it the space it needs to heal, and understanding that this world that we're in right now is going to be very limited, and there's an expiration date for all of us, right? And when you're young, you don't really think about this, but when you start getting older and you start seeing people that you really care for pass on, it changes the ball game, right? It makes you think about things less transactional and more soulful. And getting to that pivot point in life, and to this kind of spiritual ground, where you're trying to seed spiritual nuggets out there, as you would call it, and try to be someone to look up to instead of someone to look out for, right? Because that's what my story was for many years. Is I was a very violent man, and I got a rap sheet to kind of prove how much stupidity I was working with. And um, to kind of change that and being able to transmute that energy into something positive and give it back to this world and put it back into the stream of life, as opposed to keep taking from everyone around me, right? And nobody's perfect, right? You're human, and things are going to get messy. That's one thing I've learned in this life, right? It's progress, not perfection. Because when it comes down to this grief, there's never a certain amount of therapy. There's not a prescribed amount of anything to kind of walk you past some of this grief. It's going to take the exact amount of time it's going to take, and you may never get over certain things. But the reality is trying to get to that point where you can at least make a dent into it, right, and start changing it and start living for a purpose and start living. You can make it through, right? And that's the most important thing with all this is just trying to live a better life, right? This whole grief thing is it's a tricky one, right? Because there's no handbook. Well, there's no handbook to any of this shit, really. I mean, people can say, oh, the Bible, oh, no, this, the reality is it's just all of us. It's a guessing game, man. I do know that there is a higher power for me, right? And I connect with them all the time. And I do know that there's a connection in this life that I connect with other human beings, and it's very real, right? I saw it. You don't think that people are real, man. You go to a heavy situation like losing somebody, and you'll figure out real fast that people are out there and they're feeling and they're connected with people in life, right? And it's easy to not believe anything when you're constantly sitting in the cheap seats and never really experiencing life. And I did that for so long, right? I would avoid situations, conversations, just so I would not have to face some of these inner workings within myself as a person. And through that, I lacked character development, that and key components to who I was. And in the end, when all the dope ran out and all the alcohol was gone, I was faced to look at that stuff. And now that I'm in recovery, I was faced to fix a lot of these things that are inside me and change it and understand that this is part of the whole get up, right? I don't get to treat people like shit today, right? I don't get to do all the things that I used to do because today that's just not where my life is leading. And understanding that you need to let go of some of these things in life is 5 stages of grief, man. It doesn't matter what you're trying to let go of, right? The reality is you can grieve just about anything, right? Whether you can grieve a lost job, a lost pet, a lost a lost shirt. There's some things I'm like, man, God, and obviously the levels are different. Don't get me wrong. Not comparing a shirt to a human being, but there's different levels of grief, right? Even different levels of grief of like my old lifestyle, man. I grieve that, like, because some of us, I can speak from my experiences. I loved that chaos. I loved being in those situations that were dicey. It kind of filled my soul, right? And in all the wrong ways, of course, but in the end, it was just like, I knew there was something different out there, and I knew there was a different life for me, and that was some of the stuff that I kind of had to face on this journey of recovery, right? So this week I'll face some of the grief, right? The topic of grief, and I'll use my tools to kind of face some of the hidden grief that I may be going through, and also helping other people through their grief, right? This is the weekly intention. My name is Frank. Like, subscribe, share, do all those things. The more support, the better. I think this is a noble mission that I'm on, and some of my, when they do jump on here, like Dave and Eric, whenever they're on too, that's kind of our goal with this, right? And again, the weekly intention is overcoming grief. All right. F.D. Recovery, we out. Peace. Thank you for tuning in to F.D. Recovery. A reminder, be kind to yourself on this journey of recovery. Also, call your sponsor, get connected to local support groups, and for one day at a time, stay clean and sober.